This is my presentation of the Bello Gallico Book 1. To open up the Bello Gallico, Caesar begins by explaining the background knowledge of the Gauls, which are the people that he's fighting in these wars. To begin, he explains how all of Gaul is divided into three main parts: the Belgae, the Equitani, and the Celts or the Gauls. Caesar notes that the Belgae are the strongest of the three main civilizations. The main points he gives for this are that they're the furthest from Roman civilization. Their merchants often don't import objects which tend to effeminate their minds. And due to their closeness with the Germans, they frequently wage war on them. And for the same reason that the Belgae are strong, the Helvetii also pass the rest of Gaul in their valor. They're even closer to the Germans and partake in almost daily battles with them. And one characteristic of the Helvetii is that they're confined by the river Rhone, the mountain Jura, and the Lake Geneva. The Helvetii were also a society of people that love to wage war. Now, out of the Helvetii, there was a man called Orgetorix, and he by far was the most distinguished and wealthy man of the whole Helvetii. During the time of Marcus Messala and Marcus Piso being the council, he begins a plot against the nobility. He persuades the Helvetii to go forth from the territories so that they could acquire the supremacy of all of Gaul. This idea was very appealing to the Gauls because of the way they are confined on all sides, making it hard to wage war, which they love to do. The Helvetii also thought this would be a very easy task because of how superior they were to the rest of Gaul. Before they set out, they agreed they needed to gather beasts of burden, they needed to make large sowings to carry the amount of grain to feed them, and they needed to make peace with neighboring tribes. The Helvetii agreed that it would take a total of 3 years to prepare and set out on their journey. But before they set out, Orgetorix is able to convince Casticus, Assaquini, and the Morics at Iden to try and take the sovereignty of the state. He's able to persuade them to do this by offering Helvetii troops, which are by far the strongest, to help them take over their own states. And after they agree to do this, they all take an oath and hope to be the most powerful three nations in Gaul by taking over all of Gaul. Unfortunately for Orgetorix, his plot is made known to all of the Helvetii by informers, and due to their society, he's forced to plead his case in chains and pretty much go on trial. And if he was found guilty and condemned, he would face punishment of being burned alive by fire. Many men appeared at his trial in support, and according to the Bello Gallico, it says tens of thousands of his vassals. And Orgetorix ends up dying, and many of the Helvetii believe that it was him committing suicide. Has died, the Helvetii still set out to do what they plan to do. And one thing they do to make them more likely to be successful is they set fire to their towns, villages, and private homes, so that way they have no hope of returning home, so they have to go all out in doing this. And on their way, they convince their neighbors, the Racari, the Tuligi, and the Letabrigi, to do the same. And after they all set fire to all their towns, they set out together as the Confederates of the Boy. Now, after setting out, they had two roads to choose from. One was a very difficult path, which was very narrow, and it was very hard to cross even one wagon at a time. This was between the Mount Jura and the River Rhone. But there's a large mountain that overlooked the path, and it made it very hard for them to be intercepted by enemies. The other path, however, was a very easy-to-travel path, but one problem with it is that it crossed the Allobroges, which was a province which had recently been subdued by Rome, so they'd pretty much be crossing into Roman territory. They chose to take the easier path on the basis that the Allobroges did not like the Romans. The closest town to the Allobroges was Geneva, which had a bridge that leads to Helvetii, and this was the way that they planned to cross. They planned to persuade the Allobroges to let them through. They planned to either do this by talking to them and convincing them, or they would even force their way through. They set up a date to meet at the bank of the Rhone on March 28th to discuss their plans. Now this is where Caesar comes into play. Caesar heard of this news, and he immediately sets out for Geneva. Once he's there, he immediately makes the town furnish a great deal of soldiers, because he's only able to take one legion with him. He also orders the bridge to be destroyed to slow down the Helvetii. Upon hearing this, the Helvetii send ambassadors to meet Caesar and request to pass through this route. The reason they're sending ambassadors is that they're claiming they have no other route to pass through, and they claim they will cause no trouble or no harm. Even though they say this, though, Caesar remembers them killing a consul, and he doesn't believe that the barbaric people will strain from chaos. He also wants time to gather a giant army, so he denies the request, but tells them they can return on April 12th if they want to rediscuss this. And this is where Book 1 of the Bello Gallico ends.